The lost loot of Pancho Villa. The land of Mexico is filled with lost riches. Mexico's history is one of turmoil and violence, conditions that have always fostered the creation of hidden wealth. Many millions of dollars in every conceivable form have been hidden in this young country, much of it still waiting for release from its lost hiding place. There are the Aztec treasures hidden from Cortez, and the loot of Cortez rehidden from counterattacking Indians. The conquest of Maximilian by the liberating Juarez caused further frantic hiding of personal and church gold. Whenever a revolutionary junta, either general or local, has overrun a section of Mexico, the attacked people have scurried in frantic effort to hide the family money and jewels from the approaching armies. The conquerors in turn have found it necessary to hide their loot as the fortunes of war turned against them. Some experts maintain that as much as 50% of this kind of treasure is never recovered. Wherever confusion has been rampant, the field for the gold bug is a rich one. We are going to narrow our view at this moment to one particular period. To one particular location. To one particular man. The period. Circa 1918. The place. The Mexican state of Chihuahua. The man? Pancho Villa. Villa was born in the state of Durango, Mexico, the offspring of a Negro mother and an Indian father. By the age of 9, Pancho was already known as a thief and murderer. At this tender age he took to the mountains of Chihuahua and organized a band of adolescent renegades and cutthroats. As they grew older they would swoop down on the unprotected villages, murdering the men and carrying back the town's wealth and the women to their mountain hideout. His forays of pillage and rape soon met organized resistance, and Villa quickly decided that he would have to change his procedure. In the years that followed, Villa married his women instead of resorting to plain kidnapping. I should say they thought they were brides, actually these women were victims of strategy. One of his followers was dressed in the robes of a priest. When Villa saw an exceptionally beautiful girl he would have her brought to his hideout, where he proposed immediate marriage. Most of the girls consented through fear, thinking that at least their honor would be saved by a church wedding. This pseudo-priest would then tie the wedding knot, and Pancho proceeded to enjoy the fruits of illicit connubial bliss. It is a matter of record that at least 47 girls entered into a marriage contract with this fat, squat, belching fraud. The state of Chihuahua is known the world over for its fabulous gold and silver mines. It is known, too, as the stamping ground of Pancho Villa. In 1915, at the height of the revolution, Villa found a way of secretly milking these gold mines of their ore. He was especially covetous of the Dolores mine located in the Sierra Madre, not too far from the United States border. His plan of operation was swift and cunning. He sent many of his followers into the mine as laborers. These men then became high graders, or thieves. Each time a load of ore was brought to the surface, Villa's men would hide as much of it as they could, then when the opportunity presented itself they would toss the ore over the barbed wire fence to waiting Confederates on the outside. Under the cover of darkness the ore was carried to a nearby point where it was smelted and converted into bullion. Multiply what was stolen from the Dolores mine by similar acts of theft in other mines nearby, and it is easy to see how a huge stock of gold bars was accumulated at Villa's smelting plant. The mine owners did not take this open theft without counteraction. At the Dolores holdings there were 4 Americans, 3 mining engineers and a doctor. 2 of the engineers were appointed to stop the thefts. One of them began checking each miner as he came out of the mine, the other took up a position on top of the water tank, where he could see anyone who attempted to throw gold ore over the enclosure. The thieves soon knew they were being watched and that further opportunities for stealing gold had been reduced to a minimum, so they decided to eliminate the 2 Americans. One day, as one of the men was being checked at the mine, a quick knife thrust ended the life of the American at the mine entrance. Simultaneously, a Mexican who had been hiding in a little shed near the base of the water tower shot the second engineer on top of the tower. This barbarous double murder caused all Americans in Chihuahua to arm themselves and prepare for war. Villa immediately declared death to all gringos in Mexico. Meantime, the relatives of the 2 slain Americans wanted the bodies shipped to the States for burial. This presented a problem. An American doctor was at the mine, as the laws of Mexico required, but had no equipment or facilities for embalming. In this emergency he removed the viscera from each body and packed the cavity with charcoal. Each corpse was then placed in a sheet iron coffin and sealed. The sheet iron coffins were in turn placed in heavy wooden containers and more charcoal stuffed into the boxes. 50 carefully selected Indians were ordered to carry the bodies from Dolores to Temasakic, a distance of 50 miles. The sole surviving American engineer took charge of the caravan. He sent an Indian runner ahead to a point halfway to Temasakic, where he knew there was a cantina, with orders to close it up until the Indians had passed that point. I will refer to this cantina later, as it is a vital clue to finding Villa's buried treasure. It took 12 men to carry each box, and the weight being so great, not more than a mile could be covered with one crew. Finally they reached the cantina, and the Indians discovered it was closed. In rage they threw one of the bodies, box and all, over the cliff. The rest battered down the door of the tavern, and all of them proceeded to get violently drunk. At the point of a gun the young engineer forced some of the men to recover the box from the valley below and bring it back to the cantina. Hours later the drunken party staggered on toward Temasakic, arriving there days later. I only tell you this story to illustrate the great hardships encountered by Americans during the frenzied days of the Revolution. Respect for our flag had sunk to an all-time low under the gringo-hating Villa. I want you to remember that Villa's secret smelting plant was hidden somewhere in the mountains not very far from the cantina. By 1916 Villa had accumulated more than $7 million in stolen gold. All of it was kept under constant guard at the smelting plant. By this time the American government finally was aroused from its lethargy to discover that its citizens in Mexico were being murdered without reason. American property was being confiscated and the American flag ridiculed. Villa, with the silent permission of the Mexican government, thumbed his nose northward at all gringos. Under the command of General John J. Pershing, an American punitive force was sent into Mexico to bring Villa back dead or alive. It did neither. Villa retreated to his mountain hideout and waited. Later General Pershing and his troops returned to American soil, the expedition a failure. It dawned on the Mexican government that either Villa must be eliminated or the Americans were liable to order a complete invasion of their country. It decided to try to catch him. Then Villa, still hiding in the mountains, became in need of money. He instructed General Jesus Gonzalez to go to the spot near the cantina and bring back the gold bars still safely hidden there. Gonzalez left immediately, taking with him a small band of picked men. Arriving at the cantina, he turned into the mountains and soon came to the smelting plant. The gold bars were hastily loaded onto ox carts, and the band proceeded back down the mountain toward the cantina and the road to Temasakic. As they neared the cantina a runner brought news that government troops were nearby. Capture was imminent. General Gonzalez acted immediately. Within a few minutes the convoy arrived at the cantina. The ox carts were halted. Gonzalez turned east and paced off exactly 515 meters. A metro is 39 inches compared to the 36-inch American yard. This brought him to a small valley. He ordered a trench dug, and the gold bars were buried at this spot. Gonzalez disbanded his men and ordered them to work their way back to Villa's mountain stronghold. Just at this moment the Mexican army arrived and engaged the bandits in a running battle. According to verified reports, all of the bandits except General Gonzalez and one Indian were killed. Their bodies were piled up and burned. Evidence of this conflagration is still to be found. Human bones can still be located at the spot. Gonzalez reached Villa's headquarters the next day and reported. When Villa learned that the Indian soldier had successfully escaped with the general, the man was promptly executed. Now only Gonzalez and Villa knew where the gold was buried. Meanwhile the Mexican army was having a hard time catching Pancho. Finally they gave up and hit upon another plan. Villa was offered a huge tract of land in Chihuahua and the sum of 500,000 pesos each year if he promised to be a good boy. Pancho quickly accepted and went into semi-retirement on his new ranchero. Temporarily the gold was forgotten. Villa, living a life of luxury, now devoted his time to drinking tequila and chasing women. Sitting pompously in his Model T Ford, Villa would often drive to the nearest village of Jalapa, where he spent his government money on dozens of new and dazzling uniforms. One day while at his tailor's he spotted a new victim in the person of the 16-year-old beautiful Maria Villarreal, the daughter of the tailor. Villa eyed her and came to the conclusion that he would do her the honor of becoming her husband, just as he had done to his other 40-odd wives. Returning to his estate, he ordered 2 of his henchmen to return to Jalapa and bring back the girl. This was done immediately. The girl, her eyes blazing with wrath, was ushered into the presence of her future husband. Villa proposed marriage. Maria accepted. Villa winked at the man next to him, who left immediately to bring back the bogus priest. Just before the marriage ceremony took place, Maria threw her arms lovingly around the fat, greasy neck of Pancho. She whispered tender words for his ears alone. Caught in a web of feminine allure, Pancho listened. He failed to notice that Maria had deftly slipped one of his guns out of its holster. A moment later he felt the sharp end of the barrel pressing into his midsection. Maria told him that he had just 5 minutes to bring a real priest into the room or else. Pancho acquiesced with alacrity. An ordained minister of the gospel married Pancho Villa and Maria Villarreal. For the first time in his life Pancho Villa was really married. Back in Jalapa, Señor Villarreal took a blood oath to wipe out the dishonor that had come to his daughter. A few days later he and 2 trusted friends took up positions in an old tool house alongside the dirt road that led to the village. This was the only road which Villa could take to the town. 2 days later they heard the familiar chug-chug of the Model T as it neared the tool house. When the car was directly opposite, the 3 men fired. Villa was literally cut in 2 by the force of the high-powered rifles. Maria later inherited all of Villa's worldly goods. All except the $7 million in buried gold, of which she knew nothing. Thus ignominiously ended the career of Pancho Villa, born Doroteo Arango. Pancho's unexpected death brought confusion to the hearts of his band of cutthroats. Without leadership they began fighting among themselves. In one fight General Jesus Gonzalez was shot through the liver. Friends took him to the town of Dolores, where an American surgeon had been practicing for many years. This doctor, whom I shall call Macy for his personal security, and from whom I obtained this story, had lived most of his life in Mexico and was well acquainted with General Gonzalez. Dr. Macy operated on the wounded man, but death was inevitable. Knowing that he had not long to live, Gonzalez told the doctor the story of the buried treasure and gave him a map of the exact spot where the treasure had been buried. A copy of this map is reproduced here for the first time. No one but General Gonzalez, Dr. Macy, S.Y. Wills, Bro Temple, and I have ever seen this map before. All these years it has been a carefully guarded secret. Now a final note of caution to all treasure hunters who would try to find Pancho Villa's buried treasure. The district between Dolores and Temasakic is desolate and dangerous. There are no means of transportation except by mule or ox cart. Bandits still infest the area. I suppose my warnings are superfluous. If you're a real gold bug, you probably consider $7 million worth a little discomfort.